there's no rules in this bitch, okay? So we're gonna talk about whatever you want, whatever we want, because we're gonna spin it and let y'all know what we're gonna talk about for 15 minutes. We're gonna give you rapid fire stuff. They're the coaches, I'm the everyday guy. I'm gonna challenge them because who the fuck are they to tell me what to do? They don't know me. They do know me. They've known me for a really long time, but that's not the point. The point is we're here to give you guys a fun podcast and hopefully you learn some shit along the way. All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Mindset You. You might be noticing that there's only two of us today. That's because our bestie Moses is out. We love him. We miss him.
Very much so.
Very much so. And but we're still, the ball still needs to roll. You know, so here we are. Us two. Nice to see you.
We're equal height too, so that helps a lot.
It helps. The editing for this is so nice. We actually see eye to eye. I don't have to look up at you. It's pretty sweet. Today's episode, we spun self-care. So we decided to take a little liberty with that. And we're going to talk about fighter's mindset because your boy here likes to box and get punched in the face. And he decided that he's going to do an amateur fight coming up in September. It's my first one. And
nice.
It's, you know, I think this is a good topic to talk about.
Yeah, I'm just finding out about this right now.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm doing the Masters division. It's 35 and up. So I'll be in the elite division. So it's 35 to 40. I'm going down to like 153 to fight. I could have done one in May, but I was going to do 165. And that's it's an easy cut for me. It's like 5 pounds. But it's going to be fighting some big boys.
Nice.
You know, and no thanks. No thanks.
So before we get into it, remember, subscribe. Whether you're listening or you're watching, subscribe. Go to our website, vidaproject.com. If you're searching up our podcast on your podcast source, go to mindsetu.com. We'll see you there.
Yes, sir. Oh, also, make sure to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts if you're an Android user, but like, you know.
We're literally in like all podcasts.
Yeah.
Like every source.
Anywhere you
podcast.
anywhere you can find a podcast, you'll find Mindset You. So that's a good thing. So like and subscribe, please. Please help us.
All right. So I personally love this topic. And for me, the idea of talking about this as self-care is huge. And I think we can get very specific with this because it becomes very men-based self-care, right? And I'll just share a little bit about, from my perspective, with martial arts. My foundation on my perspective on life is really on martial arts. I started in Taekwondo like many of us did when I was 5 years old. I trained that for about 5 years, so about 10 years old. Then in high school, I did a little bit of boxing, a little bit of judo. I did capoeira, and then I started training like mixed martial arts through starting with capoeira. This is when MMA was very young. There weren't MMA gyms at the time. You literally had to go train this striking. You had to go train this grappling. You had to go train. So that's how I was training at the time because I was going to fight in the cage, all this stuff. And then I got a bunch of injuries. But that's another story. The key factor about this is that I started my career because I wanted to give people what I experienced through martial arts. And that was a big challenge. But I want to hear a little bit about how you got into martial arts because I feel like for you it was later in life.
You know, after the pandemic, I needed something to be active again. And as much as like I enjoy like working out and lifting weights and pushing myself in that aspect, that gets a little tiresome to me. But the act of learning a martial art, whether it's boxing or kickboxing, which I got into a little bit later in my martial arts journey, the consequences of fucking up, I like a lot.
Yeah.
I like it a lot because it forces you to focus. Mm-hmm. You can't think about anything else. Mm-hmm. You have your topic. You have your task at hand, and it's the one time that you can clear your mind And it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a freeing thing. And it's mental chess. I think a lot of people think when they hear like boxing or MMA, they think, oh, you're just going to go and fight. And there's so much more to it than just going in there and just trying to hit somebody. Because most of it, I would say 80% of fighting is mental. It's carried over to everything else in my life. But down to the self-care aspect of it, it's a major, self-care is such a major part of martial arts because you need to preserve your body to endure the kind of abuse that you're going to take. No matter how much of a team aspect it is in training, it is a very lonely sport. And same with losing. A lot of the times with a lot of fighters, it can get real lonely when you lose because sometimes people write you off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's that's another mental aspect of it. And that's where self-care also comes into it because you got to learn to love yourself. And it sounds weird saying that for fighting, you know, but like you truly have to love yourself because you have to be accepting of failure.
Yep.
And that's one thing that Vita Project taught me a lot about because a lot of the physical activities you had us do was always about going to failure, doing it till you can't do it anymore and try to keep going. And that's helped me so much in my martial arts. I'll say career for this, even though I don't get paid for any of this shit. It's helped so much in that martial arts career of knowing what it's like to lose. Because it's a huge aspect of it.
So there's the element about this where, you know, you talk about the mental awareness of the chess, right? The mental chess. But I think there's a calibration from the mental and the physical because you have to train that physical to match your thought process, right? And that's the beauty of martial arts. Then we move from there into the space of how this is actually self-care, right? Because you're treating your body in order to optimize its performance in order for you to literally survive. So if you don't love yourself enough, you're going to die. That's basically the format of thinking. And I think going deeper into that, we can talk about kind of how this sets you up to have a whole different perspective in all aspects of life. So in martial arts, you know, we talked about a little bit before where when growing up in different elements of our life, right? Started at 5 years old to about 10 years old doing Taekwondo. Then in high school, I did a little bit of judo, a little bit of boxing. And after high school is when I really dedicated myself to martial arts in just from my free time. And I had mentioned how that was something that I tried to bring to people, which was the idea, the perspective of how this physicality connects you to your mind and connects your mind to your body so that you can work as one unit. And with you, Jay, you mentioned how, you know, younger years you did Taekwondo. You said at 10 years old?
Like you, from 5 to 10.
5 to 10,
yeah.
Okay. And then you tried to do other sports. You tried to do some
Failed
physical.
horribly. Failed horribly in every other sport possible. And then in my 30s, I decided, you know what I should do? I should start fighting.
Oh, you were 30 already?
Yeah, I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I was in my late 20s, I guess, when I started with Daekwon.
Okay.
But that wasn't so much like sparring all the time. That was, you know, learning the basics, like learning like the legit basics of, you know, knowing what punches, throwing combinations, you know, doing all that stuff and being consistent with that. But like, I didn't start really like competing and like sparring like 3 to 4 times a week until I went to like an actual boxing gym. And it's changed me completely with the way I look at things, the way I handle life. But more importantly, it taught me to take care of myself a little bit better.
Yeah.
You know?
So let's go into that because there's the idea of doing martial arts. You're literally getting pummeled by someone else, right? Or you're doing the pummeling. Like how is that related to taking care of yourself? Like how is that even on the same sentence?
Yeah, it's funny when you don't fight. or if you never really, followed competition sports or anything like that, it's just like any other sport. You need to be at your peak athleticism, to peak health, in order to perform your best, because that's what you really want. You want to be able to perform to your most optimal capabilities, right? Mm-hmm. So I noticed with me, at least, it was like, okay, well, let's start with sleep. I need to get a good night's rest, because I'm going to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go train at 6, to then go to work afterwards, and then go back at nighttime to go train a little bit more. And you can't do that on 4 hours of sleep. You can get away with it for a little bit, but your body catches up to you. And the older you get, the harder it is.
Yeah. So if I can interject right there, for me, I was in my early 20s when I was really neck deep into like martial arts. Like my training regimen was all physical all day long. So I worked at the time as a waiter in P.F. Chang's, right? So I would typically go into work at 9 and I'll finish by like 3. I worked the afternoon shift. So my day started at like 5:30. I would meet my martial arts coach, my mestre from Capoeira. He worked at Bali Total Fitness. And we would work out from 6 a.m. to about 8 a.m. in the morning. Right away from there, I would run home. It wasn't too far from my house, so I took my car, run home to shower, and then I would jump on my bike to West New York, right? So it's like about 10 miles, which at that time was easy because it was downhill, right? The end of my shift at 3 o'clock was bike back uphill. So that was when I got to really put the work in.
Yeah.
I would get home. After that, then I'll go and train at home. Just skill training, right? So I had a heavy bag in my basement. Skill training, bam, 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 bam. Just an hour there, easy, eat, all this stuff. I was so thin for this time, like I couldn't put on weight. I would try. And then from there, around 5:30, I would leave my house to bike again to, not West New York, Bergen, what's it called? South Bergen? What's it called? Bergenfield, yes. Bergenfield, the town, where my capoeira school was. And there I'll take the class that was at 6 to 7. Then I'll take the next class, which I will help teach, 7 to 8. And then from 8 to 9, we would just do a bunch of like acrobatic stuff, right? And then on the weekends, on Sunday specifically, we would train starting at 6 a.m. And this was just like pure MMA training. We would meet at 6 a.m. and train till about 1 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we would go to the judo gym and train with the judo coach. Basically, it was more so how to defend, how to be able to adjust to a grappler. Then it was really us training grappling. So like this was my day, 9 to 5 every day, really 6 to 9. And the whole thing with that, going into circles back to what you were saying, is like, I'm telling you, I finished training at 9 and I would start at 5:30. So I wasn't getting that sleep. And after like 6 months of keeping this up, my body just started breaking down.
There's no other way. I don't understand what people think is going to happen. Like you're eventually going to gas yourself out.
Yeah. And at 20 years old, that was the lesson that I had to learn, which was like, now it's not just like, okay, what do I have to do to maintain? Now it's like, I'm injured all over. I can't do anything. So what does this mean? I have to learn how to rehab myself. I have to learn how to build myself back up and see how I can make this sustainable. And this is like during this time, I was already coaching people as a personal trainer, but this opened up my eyes to a whole new level, which wasn't just go intense. This was now about that self-care level of like, how do I modulate myself to maintain this performance, but be able to do this for longevity? And that to me, that was a huge lesson. And I'm grateful that I went through it at an early age, because I was young enough to recover from a lot of those things, right? Where, as a coach now, I work with people who are older, who are dealing with these injuries and never learned how to manage them. So now they're just compiled of years and years of trauma, basically.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think another aspect of like, there's so many different aspects of like self care and stuff like that. And another thing I learned from you guys is how to properly like breathe. And I don't think people realize how important, it sounds silly, how important breathing is. Breathing's super important, guys. And it's even more important when you're doing a physical activity for, 3 minutes around, let's say. Because those 3 minutes can feel like an eternity.
Yeah.
If you're tired, if you're not breathing properly, and if somebody's beating your ass, that 3 minutes can feel like hours.
That's anxiety.
Yeah.
So breathing, the interesting part about this is because you mentioned that anxiety aspect is because breathing is directly intertwined with your nervous system. You can actually regulate your nervous system through your breathing. So the more you practice that skill under stress, under duress, the more you're able to master controlling and managing your nervous system to perform when stuff is out of whack, when it's a high stress situation. How do you perform? And I think that's one of the key aspects of martial arts training. You mentioned like the mental chess. It's the mental chess calibrated with the physical element where you're able to have a physical body that can express your thought process, your nervous system, and your perspective of the world in an instant. You have to react in an instant. Otherwise, you're literally getting hurt. So the consequences that you mentioned before, they're immediate and significant.
It's true. And it's funny because like at the gym, I spar with different levels of guys, with the greener guys and the guys who are closer to my level, a lot of them are a lot better than me, but I'm able to hold my own. And they think like, oh, you have great cardio. And it's not that I have great cardio. It's that I know how to breathe. And that's because of you guys. And it's just one of those things that like, that's what I mean with the mental stuff. Like it's so mental because there's so many guys who are in such great shape that they crack under the pressure. And you're like, dude, you have a six pack, you have muscles, you have all this stuff, but it means nothing unless you have cauliflower. Then I'm like, oh shit, okay. You freaked me out a little bit. And if you guys don't understand what that means, cauliflower is from wrestling. It's also every MMA fighter, any grappling guy. So they've been around the block if they got cauliflower ear.
Yeah, it's when you have a ear that looks like a little like knot, basically. What happens is that the tissue gets trauma, either through physical or the mat itself rolling on it, and it gets trauma, and then it swells up, and the tissue dies. So it literally shrinks up into a little ball. If it's not handled immediately, it's not drained immediately. That's
true. And so, word of advice for anybody who decides that they're going to be macho and get into a fight in the street: look at their ears. It'll let you know what you're getting yourself into.
So I wanted to circle back with the self-care and the breathing aspect of this because I want to kind of explain what's really happening in the body. So when I mentioned the nervous system, right? The nervous system is what guides you, what gives you direction on how to behave. It's the lens that you're wearing. When you think about having an emotional experience, right? It's literally changing your nervous system. Your nervous system now is going into fight or flight, is going into freeze. Any of these things are happening at a subconscious level. And the more we are disconnected from that, the less that we're able to actually influence our own behavior. So when we train in something like martial arts, and the reason why in Vida Project, our company, we work so much with the physical element, it's all about experiencing that physicality, is because you're literally learning how to tune your nervous system, right? So breathing is a great way to start doing that. And there's certain breathing practices. For example, there's a thing called Tumo breathing, very similar to the Wim Hof style of breathing. So basically, you're breathing in a very fast pattern. The reasoning for this is that it's putting you literally in an anxiety state. That fast breathing is the same thing as someone having an anxiety attack, right? And when you do that, you're able to, number one, see your thoughts happening because you're inducing this on yourself, right? So if you can create the space from inducing this on yourself and recognizing what is happening, you start to freak out. You're like, oh my God, something's wrong. Something's going to go, right? You have the thought process in that. You're doing this with your body. And then you have the moment where you hold your breath, right? Where everything comes to calm. And there's a little moment of silence there that's just like, ah. And then the panic starts to arise because you're like, I need to breathe. I need to breathe. I need to breathe. And then you also go through that. So all of this awareness, what is happening is that you're listening to what your nervous system is screaming out to you. And then you're taking your brain and acknowledging it. And then with that acknowledgement, then you're saying, wait, this is how I'm going to behave. So you're literally practicing your behavior. This is exactly what happens in a combat sport, right? Where the issue is that you're not fully in control, where I can start breathing whenever I want. The issue is that someone else is in control of how much they're pummeling you, right? So there is no kind of escape plan, right? It's in your face. And this trains us in a high level of stress to be able to modulate ourselves. So as you said in the experience, when you're going through in a match and someone is like really aggressive and so on and so forth, and your thoughts, all those thoughts start to creep in, telling you, why is he so, did I do something? Is he angry? Right? Those are all your nervous system thoughts. And now you learned how to modulate that and say, hey, you be quiet. All right, I hear you. Be quiet. This is how we're going to approach this. But it's also another element of this, which is like the same thing as I explained when you're holding your breath, right? And then that calm and then panic. Because when you're getting your ass beat, what it does, it really anchors you in reality. Number one, it takes your ego and chops it the hell down, right?
Amen.
So it makes you confront your biggest fears about yourself, because when your ego is hurt, everything you believe about yourself is hurt. And in that moment now, it's like, that's when you really learn to love yourself, when you have no ego left.
Yeah. Or if you get your ass beat in front of your friends and family and in front of a crowd, it's definitely a humbling experience. Mm-hmm. And you learn, I think the best part, you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
You learn a lot about yourself when you're in a crisis situation. Like the same thing, like they say, in a relationship, you don't know how strong your relationship is until you handle some shit. Mm-hmm. You know, if everything's, oh my God, everything's so much fun. It's like, that's great. But how do you guys handle stress? How do you guys handle the hard stuff? Yeah. You know, and that goes into everything. And I think with the fighting stuff, it's helped with life. Yeah. You know, because it all carries into everything. Everything kind of marries itself to something else. You know, you could always take one aspect of what you learn from something and apply it to something else. And I think with fighting helped me do that in a sense of being like, you don't have to freak out. Mm-hmm. You're gonna figure it out. It might not be the outcome that you want, but you're gonna figure it out. And that's helped tremendously in life.
Yeah. So there's an aspect of that, because you have to consciously remember these experiences and take them out of that box of fighting and put them into life, right? So it's an active practice to do in order to be able to really reap the benefits across the board. I wanted to go into the idea of how this is integral to self-care, which is when you're doing all of this and you're experiencing these trauma-like experiences, micro traumas constantly, right? I think there is something that we need to get into, because when you think of self-care, I think people always think about the glitzy, pretty stuff of self-care, right? Like, you got to make yourself feel good, treat yourself, right?
Namaste.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this kind of clashes with that idea, because we're literally saying end up bloody, swollen, and then it's like, this is self-care, right? And if you haven't experienced martial arts, you this won't compute.
I want to say one last thing. So when I had my smoke shows and stuff like that, I mentioned that I was like 3-1, and I always made a point that even though I won the next day, I was at the gym at 6:00 in the morning, and when I lost, I made sure I was there at 5:30 in the morning. Just because it's like, you win, it's a win. Great, you won. You still have so much to learn. There's so many things that you could have worked on. There's so many other things that you can do. And it's even more important when you lose. I think it's more important to lose, that you treat it just like how you treated a win.
Yes.
You still have to go and work. The world still keeps moving. And I think that when you lose, I think everybody's like, oh, they're going to think I'm a loser. No. And the people who do it, what does it matter? Mm-hmm. They're not in that ring. Anybody who's going to judge you for losing in a competition is somebody who doesn't compete.
Yeah. Brene Brown, in her book, she talks about this one quote that the harshest critics are in the cheap seats. They're always in the bleachers. Those are the ones that are the judging. They're not the ones in the arena.
Yep, the coulda, shoulda, woulda kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, oh, I could do that if I had this. Oh, I can do that if I did that. I would have won if I did this, but you didn't.
And I think that's going back to that mind-body connection. So if you can connect from your mind from like, oh, I could do this, and your body to react to actually do that, that is self-mastery. So when you work on developing that self-mastery so that the body and the mind are not disobedient to each other, so they work well with each other, so they work in unison and synchronicity, that is pure art. And to finalize the idea of self-care, when we talk about self-care, when you turn your body and mind into an art form expression, that is the most powerful potential that you could take yourself.
It's a high. It's a drug. Mm-hmm. It truly is a drug. There's no other drug. Like, I love pot. Pot doesn't compare to the way you feel from competing and just training in general. And I think that's the reason why I do it, because it's addictive. I love training more than I like actually fighting, because I feel like you learn so much more in the training aspect of it, because you don't technically have to do it. Mm-hmm. There's nobody's putting a gun to your head to go to the gym in the morning. There's nobody putting a gun to your head to eat right. There's nobody putting a gun to your head to say, you know what, put down that beer, grab that water. It's all on you. And I think that's what builds that character. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of self-care, is holding yourself responsible for the little things. Not just making it to practice, mm-hmm. not just doing this. It's you hold yourself accountable in all aspects, because it all circles back to each other.
Mm-hmm. And the last point to that is, what happens to the person who's training their mind and body in that physical combat sport is that they walk around with a confidence. And it's not this idea of the bully, I can beat everyone up. And that's the person that hasn't been beat enough. Is the confidence of understanding myself and understanding the others. Because you walk into a room, you see how someone moves, you understand right away. You start to create this like decoding system in your brain. You understand, and you understand a physical body to a whole nother level.
It's true.
And to go to another topic, it also helps in bed, because when you connect in that physicality, you also connect in the bedroom with your partner.
Stroke game is strong now. Sorry, babe. I'm not sorry. You're welcome.
Yeah, I was about to say, what are you saying?
You're
sorry,
welcome. Well, I was just sorry that we're putting out our bedroom business out there, but it's true. Gotten better.
Yeah. Well, I've been 20 years and bedroom game strong.
You know, that's important. People don't realize how important that shit is. It is important. Anyways, we can talk about this for like 6 more hours if you let us. So we're gonna stop it there. This was a great podcast. This is something I love talking about with Rances. Because this is something that we actually really connect on. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of our bonding things, is that we have a love for martial arts, and we like to see how it translates to the rest of our lives. It's another great episode of Mind Take You. Mo, we miss you.
Yeah, Mo would have been great on this topic, because he kind of explored it later in life as well.
Yeah. And he's also a basketball coach too. So I also play some. It's not a combat sport, mm-hmm. but it's still a mental aspect of winning and losing and stuff like that. So yeah.
So guys, listen, subscribe. Like we mentioned before, every week this podcast is growing. We're getting new subscriptions. We're getting more comments. So be part of that wave. Join us and put in the link below. You're gonna see a link that is for you to click on and vote on what you want us to talk about, right? The different topics.
Let us know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys. Sweet.